All right, so let me ask you what specific questions. I'm going to go over some of the best practices or best ways, and I have some new conversation that we'll share with you for getting the buyer representation agreement signed and some potential objections. Um, but let me know what your questions are because I want to make sure that we're covering what you need to know. Hi, Maria. Thank you for turning your camera on.
I guess it's just all the different forms that are going to be, going with the buyer representation. And I know we're just talking about the buyer representation, but I guess I get confused because if someone wants to come into an open house but they don't want to be represented, and so I think there's, and maybe we just start with this, and I get that, and then
Okay.
we.
So what we'll do, we've had a lot of discussion around open houses and we'll continue to have more because I know that some of the new things are confusing. What I'm doing right now is I'm pulling up a BRBC so I can share it with you. And so what I'm going to do is go through it briefly, and then we're going to go through some conversation that you can have around getting it signed. Okay. So as I go through it, let me know if there is a specific question that you have when we go through each part. Sound fair? Okay. Let me go ahead and share the screen. And after we go through this, I will also pull up the PSRA because that is something that we can use if there's a potential objection to signing the BRBC. Okay, so but let's do this in order. So we're going to start with the BRBC, and let me make that a little bit bigger. All right, is that better? Everybody see that okay? Okay, so now I have this filled out as a sample. This isn't going to be, I'm not going to go over you guys can figure out how to. Remember up here, this is one of the questions we get, the date prepared. This is always the date you're actually filling the form out, not necessarily the date it's being signed. Okay. So a couple things to note is what is different from before is we cannot exceed 3 months for the representation period. Okay. Notice that's not 90 days, it's 3 months. So this one was filled out on 7/24, so 3 months takes us to 10/24. Okay, you can do a modification before this expires to extend it for another 3 months. Okay, so don't think you're locked into only this. Now, the other thing that I'm going to suggest that you do is always check the box exclusive. Okay, if you do not check the exclusive box, then that means they can be working with multiple people. And that's not what you want. You want to make sure that if you're spending your time working for somebody, trying to find them the right home, then you're going to want to check the exclusive box. Cindy, did you have a question?
Not me, Jody.
Jody, so I was listening to the CAR video on the presentation, and the lawyer that was giving the presentation said it's best to go non-exclusive, and he explained that if someone doesn't understand this, that then if they sign another exclusive with some other buyer's agent, and then they're going to be owed both of the agents are going to be owed the commission. And so that's the point he was making, I think. So I didn't know how you felt about that, because I would think we'd want to go with exclusive too.
Yeah, and you do want to go with exclusive. My guess is there's something more to that explanation, not just non-exclusive. What he was I didn't listen to the one you listen to, because I've not heard that. My guess is he was talking about if somebody had signed too. So here's the way I would see that, and of course we can verify this with brokers with CAR compliance if somebody signs an exclusive agreement with you and with somebody else because they didn't know what they were signing, first of all, shame on the agents that got that signed and the buyer doesn't understand what they're signing. Okay. So if we're explaining this to them properly, that should not be an issue. Secondly, whoever signed it first would be my guess of who would enforce it, not two people trying to enforce an agreement. And then there could be some conversation with the agents. I still would sign an exclusive representation agreement, but you have to explain what they're signing. We're not just checking boxes and making it exclusive and putting compensation amounts in and sending it to them to sign without talking to them. And that's the practice that a lot of agents used to do. And we are not to do that anymore. We actually need to be professionals talking with our clients. So, Karen, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do have a question. I have a land contract coming up, and then you said the first period was 3 months. About land, is it to a year?
Are you talking about a listing agreement or a buyer
Yeah, as a listing for land, it's not a residential, but it's a land.
Yeah, so listing agreements can have up to 24 months. So
Okay.
you're talking about the buyer representation agreement right now. So when
Yeah.
right here where it says not to exceed 3 months, this is for the buyer representation agreement.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
okay.
Thank you.
Clarifying
Thank you.
questions are good.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you say 3 months, you have to count the days or calendar days?
3 months from today till 3 months from today. So it's not days. It isn't. So if it's signed on 7/24, then the 24th, 3 months later, which is 10/24, it's not days, it's months. So
months.
for instance, today is August 12th. So September, October, November 12th.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I know.
So the shorter,
but this one isn't. What, Ernie?
yeah. So I mean, the shorter months don't matter. Like you know, I mean, say you go for February, it's just going to be shorter.
It's not days, it's months.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it does not matter.
And you have to be exactly 3 months. If not, it's void, correct?
No, it can be anywhere within that time. You can make this
Right.
valid for a month. It just cannot exceed 3 months.
Okay, but if there's months that have shorter days, then that wouldn't be 3 months. To me, it wouldn't.
Yes, because I mean, February is a full month, even if it only has 28 days, right?
Correct.
March is still a full month with 31 days. So it doesn't matter how many days are in the month. It just matters that it's not more than 3 months. Has
Okay.
nothing to do with number of days.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ernie, did you have a question?
Yeah, back to that exclusive. I've heard different conversations as far as. I mean, I would want explain that, and I don't know the verbiage down in what is it, paragraph 15 or whatever.
Mhm.
But I would want my client to think that they're exclusively with me. It might not hold up in court, like or take them to court because procuring causes or completing the contract legally on a purchase or what have you. But I still would, all of that legal wise or not, I'd still want my client to think that they're exclusively with me.
Absolutely. And really the point of this, the way that they have done this new agreement, notice how we have highlighted points throughout it now. We need to be going through this with them. So when we sit down with the client and we say, okay, so in order for me to get started to represent you, all we have left to do is to sign the buyer representation agreement, right? Now, let me explain to you how compensation works. You might have heard of a little news story with the NAR settlement, correct? Have you heard of that? Right? And most people are going to say yes. And every once in a while, somebody will say no. And so what I would do very first thing, even before I do this, and so let's kind of do this in order. Let's back up a little bit just to help with the conversation more, and then we'll come back to the agreement. Does that sound Fair?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would do before, hang on, sorry if that makes you dizzy. Before I go into the agreement at all, I would go to the second page and I would read this paragraph to them. But also while doing that, you have to insert terms that they can understand. We recently just shot a video for our productivity coaching agents that will be available soon. It's in the editing stages of exactly how to present this. Okay. So I would say, okay, now before we do that, let me explain how compensation works. Okay. Notice here, this is our broker compensation advisory to you. And historically in California, many sellers brokers used a multiple listing service to make a unilateral offer to compensate a buyer's broker who procured a buyer for the seller's property. Now that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, right? So we would want to say, in essence, what this says is that in the past, we had always had an offer of compensation for the buyer's agent that was listed in the MLS. However, due to the settlement, we are no longer able to do that. So you'll notice here, buyers and sellers must separately negotiate compensation with their respective brokers, as specified above. Meaning now the buyers have to agree to pay their agent their portion of the compensation, and the sellers agree to pay their agent, the list agent, their portion of the compensation. But don't worry, we can still negotiate to have the seller pay your compensation to me. Notice here that the buyer negotiates for seller to compensate buyer's broker. Buyer's agent negotiates an agreement directly with seller. So we are still able to negotiate that. However, before we can start any of this process, we do have to have the buyer representation agreement signed. Okay, so let's go through that now. And then that's when I would go back up to the top and explain to them that this is a 3-month agreement. You are agreeing to exclusively work with me for the next 3 months to help you find your home. And in that time, I'm confident that we're going to find you just the right home. And then you will have to, I would even go down here to number 15, right? So what exclusive representation means is that this agreement shall be exclusive. Broker, me, will devote time and resources to assist buyer in finding and acquiring the property in expectation of being paid for broker services. Buyer shall not enter into another representation agreement in conflict with this agreement. So essentially, Mr. Buyer, what this means is you're agreeing to work exclusively with me because I am going to be doing 100% to get you just that right house in the right amount of time with the least amount of money, right? So then come back up, because remember, part of the reason all this lawsuit and everything happened was because not all agents were explaining things. Now in California, we've always had the forms that say this, but people sign things without reading them, right? Ernie, did you have a question or is your hand still up from before? Okay, I'm just checking. Okay. So now let's go back to the rest of the agreement. And you can even ask them, do you have any questions about that? Okay. Now we're looking for a single family home for you. And then if any of these other things apply, you can check the boxes. And then you're going to check the county box. Okay. And what counties are you working in? You can put cities. If you put counties, then you don't have to list a bunch of cities. So that's whatever you and your buyer want to do there. I prefer personally counties because where I live, Tulare and Kings County, there's like 15 minutes apart, depending on where you're going in those counties, right? Okay. Now, when you get here, you have to slow down again. And you have to say, okay, remember, as mentioned earlier, that I would just tell them, read this right here. This is a notice to you that the amount or rate of real estate commission is not fixed by law. It never has been. It's always been negotiable between the buyer and broker. However, my fee for my services, because I am going to find you just that right home, is 3%. Okay. And if a buyer happens to come to us that does not have an agent representing them. Oh, never mind. Sorry. I'm mixing up the listing agreement. Anyway, so my fee for that is 3%. And then right here, if for 30 days, you could put 60 or 90, whatever you're comfortable with. If within 30 days of our agreement ending, you do decide to move forward and write an offer on any of the properties we've looked at together, then during that time period, I would be the one to represent you. Okay. And then if they have questions about, well, I understand that you have to do it this way, but I just don't have the money for all of that. If they don't have sufficient funds to pay you, you can check this box. Buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay the broker. In which case, at this point, you're going to set the expectation, okay, Mr. Buyer, that's perfectly fine. I can still help you, but here's what we'll do. I'm going to go ahead and check this box that you don't have sufficient funds to pay the down payment, closing costs, and my fee. And what this means is that we will only be able to look at properties where the seller has indicated that they will consider a concession, which is now the new practice in the MLSs. They can check a box that says they're willing to consider a concession. Not necessarily how much they're going to pay, but they'll consider it. So we can only look at those properties. Is that agreeable to you? Okay. So basically, as you're going through this, you're explaining each thing. Then the rest of this just explains everything that was in the grid. You don't have to go through that in detail. But coming back to the bottom, remember, this is an exclusive representation, so you'll initial here when I send this over for you to sign electronically. And this just confirms that my fee is 3%. Okay? And then you give it to them to sign. So really, it's just a matter of having to change our way of doing things, our way of saying things. We have to make sure that we're not shortcutting this process. Okay, so a buyer consultation is now incredibly important. Has anybody ever worked with a buyer where they didn't do an official meet in the office buyer consultation? So that should not happen anymore. You should be meeting in the office. You should be having a full buyer consultation, because you need to explain the process and how it works. Okay, and we're going to have a video up soon that will give you a sample of how you can conduct a buyer consultation. Okay, so what questions come up for you right now?
So Jodi, for me, the question that comes up under, the in G2, where it says other financial considerations, I just want to be able to explain to my buyers, if they're going to, take out a loan as a payment, as a compensation payment, then I know that now the loans aren't going to be, counted as credits as far as the bank is concerned. So I'm a little bit foggy on that. So, how would I explain that if they're like, well, I might have to take out a loan to pay you?
Okay, so hang on, let me go back to it. Let me pull up what she's talking about. Okay, so that's here on G2. So the first one is buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay broker. I think that's what's going to be checked more times than not. The second one is this your question, Nina? Buyer intends to purchase with the following loan product, which does not allow buyer to pay compensation to broker. we don't think that one's really going to be an issue because when this form was made, VA hadn't yet said, hey, we're going to let the buyers go ahead and pay their broker. VA has said now the buyers can pay their broker. So I am not aware of any loan product that this is going to apply to, and it doesn't mean there won't be one. Okay. I'm just not aware of one right now. So I really don't think you're going to have to ever use this box, at least not in the near future. Karen?
Yes, I have a question is, I have in the past and then also I do still have buyer are tricky and they're saying, we don't want to sign the contract with you. In the past, it's okay, they're working with several agents. Right now, is that the case? I have to make them sign, otherwise I would get the $2,500 fine. Is that the case?
That is correct. So
Okay.
here's the thing. In the past, agents have shortcutted the process. Agents typically, oh, this buyer says they're ready. I want to go show them the house. I want to be able to write that offer. I don't want to lose them. So I don't want to make them sign anything. Well, then those are the same buyers that you're going to go spend all your time showing property to. They're going to go into an open house and meet somebody and write an offer with them. And then you just wasted your time. That's how we used to do things. A lot of agents, right? That is no longer allowed. One of the
And yeah, and another thing is not I am trying cutting the corner. It's a buyer are tricky. They say, oh, I want to work with several agents. I'm gonna see which one they have the best resources. And actually, one of the deal I lost was regarding that, and they was just like, oh, I went with other agent. Then that's the thing. Yeah.
But you know what, Karen? If somebody tells me that, I don't want to work with them anyway. Because why would I waste all of my time and energy on somebody who won't commit to working with me? So I'm going to use that time and energy to find somebody else who will commit to working with me. So, however, right now, nobody can get away with that anymore, right? We all have to be the professionals that we should have always been. Now, here's what you can do though, and let me pull this up. I forgot I don't have the sample yet, so I've filled out. Let me grab it.
While you're looking for that, you brought up that earlier is the buyer compensation, and that's presenting your value and what you bring to the table to where you don't want to go to another agent.
Right, because remember, price is only an issue in the absence of value.
So we got to find ways to differentiate ourselves from the other agents and show how much better we are.
Right. I'm getting into my zip forms because I want to pull up the PSRA, because you're still going to have a buyer who's going to say, well, I don't really know you. This is the first time I'm meeting you. I don't want to sign a 3-month agreement with you. Okay, so you have a couple of options. Oops, where are we? Here we go. Let me pull it up because I can't think and look at the same time. Okay. Property. There we go. All right. Waiting on zip forms here. Okay. So we have a couple of options. Let's say they don't want to sign a 3-month agreement with you. You haven't known them very long. They need to get to know you. Well, we can do what I always suggested in the past with the BRBC, with the exclusive BRBC, and say, I'll tell you what, how about instead of making this for 3 months, we make it for 1 month? Because here's what I'm confident will happen. Within this month, one of two things is going to happen. Either we are going to find you the perfect home at the right price, or I will have proven myself such that you'll be happy to extend this for another 3 months to give us the time we need to find you just the right house. Okay, that would be my preferred first way to handle that objection, because at least you're still getting them to commit to you exclusively for the time period. Okay, now the second way would be, okay, I understand you may be leery about signing an agreement right now, so here's what we can do. I do have a representation agreement that we can sign today that will allow us to look at these up to 3 properties. And if you do choose to move forward on any one of these, then you would be working with me. You would be responsible to use me. Now, after this, we can just, if you like how everything goes, we can discuss signing a further agreement. Does that sound fair? Okay. And then that's where you would use this. This is the PSRA. So this is for up to 1 to 3 properties. It's the same thing though, right? This one though cannot exceed 30 days. And just to make sure they confuse you completely, this is days, not a month. So if you sign this in February, you can go a day or 2 into March, depending on the year. So this cannot exceed 30 days, okay? And then you're still going to put your amount of compensation here. And then just explain to them that they are committing to use you for the 1 to 3 properties that you have listed here. Okay, now a buyer can have multiple PSRAs with multiple agents as long as they are all different properties. But this is not what I want you to get into the habit of using, because this is like the easy way out, because we don't want to have the conversations that we're afraid to have. We need to practice those conversations and we need to get good at them so that people will work with us. Okay. This is like the last ditch effort if somebody's really arguing the point, not the first go-to. Does that make sense? This is also a form you're going to want to have at all of your open houses with you. So when you do open houses, make sure that you have this form on hand with your name, your brokerage, and the address of the open house already listed on here. Okay, because if somebody walks in that is not represented, you want to be able to represent them for that property. In which case, this is a good form to have because you don't know them, right? You just met them in the moment. So this would be appropriate for that. Then you would still talk to them like you've always talked to them. Build the rapport and set an appointment to do a real buyer consultation where you'll get the actual BRBC signed.
And that's basically like, I mean, you say, well, I'm not allowed to give you the information on the property unless you sign this paper.
Yeah,
Right? I mean,
basically,
but you can, I mean, you say, look around, but I can't give you any information, right?
yeah, we can give them the flyer, but we can't go
Okay.
beyond the flyer.
Well, why would you?
Well, because you have to remember the way the new regulations are, anything that can be construed by a buyer as representation means you have to have one of those 2 forms signed.
Mm.
It is now required. Question,
But
Nina?
how can explaining about the house be construed as that? How can, if someone says, well, what's bedrooms? Oh, like if they say, oh, does it have a new roof? Well, you can't say that because now you're.
If it's on the flyer, you can. So, because here's the thing. So in an open house, the way you can do that is if they sign the OHNA, the open house sign-in form, the CAR one. Guys, please do not use any other sign-in sheets right now. I don't care what pretty fancy ones you have. Do not use them right now. Use the open house sign-in form. It's OHNA-SI. We always just say OHNA. Up to 7 people can sign in per page. Okay, that's what protects you because that form lets them know you're not representing them, and any conversation you have is in behalf of the seller. And That's only if it's a listing from your brokerage. If you're doing a open house for a listing outside of your brokerage, you may not talk to them about anything unless they sign a PSRA or BRBC. Because your presence at that house and letting them walk through and answering any questions is considered representation.
So the OHNA, I thought that was like for, I mean, primarily if somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I'm represented," and so it's like, okay, we sign this and tell me who you're represented by, and then you can tell them information about the house because they're represented by somebody else.
You can hand them, all you can do is give them a flyer if they sign the OHNA. But if it's not from your brokerage, you can't talk to them. You can let them look at the house. You cannot talk to them unless they sign a PSRA or BRBC. Ernie, how come we can only see your forehead? There you go.
Yeah, the laptops. That's kind of. I mean, I thought we were allowed to talk to them if they were represented by another agent coming into and signing that OHNA.
If they come in and if the open house belongs to your brokerage and they
Okay.
sign the OHNA, then yes.
Okay, but if it's not
does
our broker,
not belong
still
to
that.
your brokerage, then no. Because even if they sign an OHNA, you don't represent the seller because it's not your brokerage. So it doesn't apply. So the best way to avoid confusion is don't do open houses outside of your brokerage. Even though a lot of brokerages allow it, and you just have to understand you can't talk to anybody about the property. You can't answer any questions unless they sign a PSRA.
Well, I'm doing open houses. If I do an open house for somebody from another brokerage, my primary it's to basically get the other one signed. Find people coming in off the streets.
Yeah.
And getting them signing that of the other contract. So either way, I mean, I'm looking for buyers if I'm doing an open house.
But you guys don't stress out about what you can and can't say. And if, oh man, I have to get them to sign into this, or I have to make them sign this. Practice the conversations. Get with another agent, get with a friend or a family member, have them be that person that comes in and doesn't want to sign in. Practice how you're going to handle it. Practice how you would handle if you have to make them sign something. Remember, practicing our conversations is what is helping you get good at your job and give you confidence. So don't worry about, oh my gosh, I have to say that. Oh my gosh, I have to do this. Just start practicing it.
No, it's just making it policy. That's just the way we work. That's
Absolutely.
if we were at a job and an employer says this is the way you got to do it, they do one training and say, okay, go, and that's it. And if you didn't do it, you get fired. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Just all right, this is a policy now, so stop blocking
you
it, learn it, and use it.
This is the way you got to do it. And it doesn't mean we have to love it. Okay. We know this is new. We know this is going to take some getting used to. Change is hard for some people, and we understand that. It doesn't change the fact that this is what we have to change to. Karen, did you have a question?
Yes. For instance, is my own listing is in the future, in the past, I have to promote on social media, Instagram or whoever. Obviously, I don't know those buyers. And is that in the future going to be an issue, even as my own listing?
So potentially, yes. And I am still actually waiting for clarification on that question. That question has come up. Can we do virtual tours of homes and post them on social media? And here's what I do know. If it's not your listing, the answer is definitely no. Okay, if it's not your personal listing, the answer is definitely no. We are still waiting for clarification from one of the brokers who's contacting CAR compliance on that. So right now, to be safe, unless your broker tells you it's okay, because that will supersede what I'm going to say, do not do that. We need clarification on that. We think it'll be okay if it's your listing, but I can't promise that. So just don't yet.
I'm just gonna, I just think it's gonna not make sense to buyers because, and I understand we have to educate them, but I'm just trying to imagine a scenario where a buyer comes in and you give them a flyer and they ask you a question and then you say, I need you to, sign in, please, and then I can explain to you. And they're like, well, why can't you just tell me? And then, and you want to make sure that they feel comfortable. They don't feel like, what the heck, so I get that we should practice those conversations. I just think, yeah, it's a very delicate situation.
It can be, but remember, it's all in how we also handle it, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things, if you're doing an open house and it's not your listing, even if it's your brokerage's listing, and now the conversation is going to where you're in questionable ground, whether or not you're still talking about this house, whether or not, okay, you'll just have to tell, you know what? I would really love to help you. As a matter of fact, I have a form here that for me to continue this conversation, I'm going to need you to sign. And they may say, well, why? You can say, well, I'm sure you've probably heard in the news the NAR settlement lawsuit. Yeah. Well, due to that, it has now become a requirement that for me to talk to you any more about this property or any other property, I have to have you sign this form. So it can be the PSRA. And if they balk about it, then just say, I completely understand how you feel, but please understand, if I were to continue this conversation without having you sign this form, it could actually cost me $2,500. And so all I'm doing is trying to comply with our new requirements, even if we think they may be silly.
Yeah, and I think explaining to them, so there's different ways we can approach this. I can give you information as long as you know that I'm not representing you, I'm only representing my seller. Or if you would like me to help you, then.
Right.
No, but you know what though? From the beginning of the get-go, though, you find out if they're represented.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right,
say, how'd you
exactly.
find out about the house? And if they're represented, then you set down the guidelines. Well,
Yeah.
just let you know the rules are that
Yeah.
I can give you this flyer and that's about it. If you want to be represented.
And I
Here's where we
appreciate
can
you
go.
bringing that up, Bernie, because that should be the very first thing you ask everyone who enters the home, right? If you're
Mhm.
doing an open house. By the way, are you working with another agent? No. Okay, so you've not signed any kind of a representation form with another agent? No. Okay, great. What I do need for you, though, for me to be able to have you walk through the house and answer any of your questions, is for you to sign in here where it says agent. Just go ahead and put none. Make sure you have them right. No, none, NA, whatever you want on that form, because that's showing you asked them and you're protecting yourself. So if they did sign something with someone else and you get them to sign it, you're not stepping on that agent's toes because they told you they didn't have anybody. And then if you find out they are, well, then you got to do, back off and whatnot. But that should be the very first thing that you ask when they come into the open house. Remember, those of you that have coached with me for any length of time, when we coach you on how to do an open house, one of the first questions is, after you get them to sign in, have you been looking very long? Or how long have you been looking for a home? Right? Which leads into, are you working with an agent?
Or how'd you find out about us?
Yeah.
So Zillow. Oh, okay. So that's how you found out, or are you represented with anybody? Did they help you, or you went on your own? I'm on my own. Oh, okay. Then you know where to direct them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So please make sure that is the first question you are asking them as you're getting them to sign in. Gabby, did you have a question?
Yes, so shouldn't you, with your client, when you get a BRBC signed, shouldn't you be telling them beforehand, hey, if you do decide to go to open houses, this is what's going to happen?
Yes, absolutely. That should be part of your buyer consultation.
That
Is
way they're informed, right?
Yes. Because you're agreeing to work with me exclusively. What this means is when you go into an open house, make sure that you let them know that you have this agreement signed with me. As a matter of fact, I would even encourage you to have them take a picture of page 5 and put it on their phone. That way, if they do go into an open house, they can show it to the agent and the agent won't bother them.
Yeah, I mean, so what we were talking about a little bit more is as far as conversations, it's kind of put off by just flat out going, do you have an agent? Are you represented? You know, and ask, say, have a, a little bit of, protocol or what, or, like, how'd you find out and this and that? And then you could also say, hey, there's a few questions I have to ask you before you come in, and ask, or something like that, something to lead into it instead of just, are you represented by anybody else?
Well, nothing changes the fact that we welcome them in and we ask them to sign in. As they're signing in, we just simply ask, by the way, are you working with another agent? Are you already working with an agent? Right? Because now we have to know this information. Because one, if they did sign a BRBC exclusively with someone, we cannot have them sign an agreement with us, just like a listing agreement. So we need to know that now. So there's no reason not to ask that question. And number two, we need to know, because if they're not represented and the conversation goes that direction, we need to have them sign with us so we can continue that conversation.
Jody, I had another question about the way things have changed. When I was doing open houses, even if somebody came in and said, "Oh yeah, I have an agent," and they signed into my sheet, and they even gave me the agent's number, and even the agent giving me their card or what have you, I still followed up and and said, "Thanks for coming in. What'd you think about the house? And are you, did you discuss with your agent or something like that about putting an offer in?" Things like, and you're not supposed to talk to the client, but just kind of just did a follow-up call. And we're really stepping on a lot of toes doing that, right? We're stepping on laws.
If they have indicated that they have a signed agreement with someone else, do not call them to follow up. What I would do, and this will also be really good way for you to get to know other agents that are in your community and build rapport, is I would call that agent. And I would say, your client came through my open house. I would love to hear their feedback. Did you have any questions? Right? Have they called you? Are they thinking about? So you can do that same follow-up, but do it with the agent. And I realize that's not helping you get the lead, but what it is doing, it's building rapport with the other agents that are in your community. And that is important, guys. That is super important, to have a good relationship with the other agents. And if you're known to be that type of person, when you do have listings, people are going to want to show your listings. When you give an offer on one of their listings, they're going to want their sellers to really look at your offers. I've had offers accepted even though they weren't the best ones, because they knew working with me was going to be a smooth experience. And I have had clients accept others' offers that weren't the best one, because I assured them of the experience they would have. Right? That comes up in conversations. That matters. So follow up with anyone, with the agents of those whose clients came through.
I was just kind of laughing inside, thinking the agent's going, well, you get the response, that's not my client. you know, like they lied or that's not
Sorry.
a client.
You must- Well,
Yeah.
it's just giving them a name. If they really know the person, then they're going to reach out to them, right? If they don't really know,
Right.
you then feel free to reach back out. But really, guys, we have got to make sure we're doing our jobs properly. Mildred?
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about this, I still see open houses as a real key to helping to build our databases. It's
Absolutely.
just we're going to have more information on these clients. The ones that don't want to sign it, as Jody said, we just don't want to deal with them anyway. But the ones that do sign, this is a way to build your database. So see this as a positive thing. This is a good thing.
I love that, Mildred. Thank you for saying that. The bold law, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. This is massive opportunity. This is opportunity for us all to become better professionals, better representers of our buyers.
It's just, I mean, like I always say, just whatever game you're playing, when they change the rules, you just learn the rules and play by them. You know,
Yeah.
just make adjustments all the time in sports. And I mean, the bases are bigger or what have you, you know, but
Yeah.
just learn the rules and play by them.
Yep. So remember, I shared this on our mastermind the other day, and not all of you are on the mastermind. So, because that is for PC agents only, but I'll share it here. I don't know if anybody remembers something called the TRID. And that was it had to do with RESPA. Title companies and lenders used to be able to give us the moon to do things. And we also didn't used to have to wait 3 days from the time a buyer signed the closing disclosure for them to sign their loan docs. So like if there was a discrepancy, we could just fix it. They look at it, they sign it, and then they could sign loan docs. Okay. Well, when a little thing called the TRID came along, and this was probably in the early 2000s, the entire industry freaked out, especially lenders, title companies. Everybody, oh my gosh, if there's numbers are wrong and they have to change them, now we got to wait 3 more days for them to be able to sign their loan docs. I mean, it was a mess. Everybody flipped a lid. But guess what? I forgot about that. I saw somebody post that comment on Facebook recently and went, oh yeah, I remember that. But I had completely forgotten about it. So remember, whatever's throwing your mind into a tizzy right now, and let's be honest, some people that's happening for them, and that's okay. This too shall pass. This too will become normal. So here's what I know will happen, and probably by the end of the year, because you know, CAR every year we have at least 2 form updates, usually June, July, and then December. One of 2 things is going to happen by December. Okay. Either everything's going to go just fine, and so we'll keep doing things according to the new requirements, or there will be some hiccups and stuff, and then it'll get figured out as we start working this way, and CAR will make some adjustments in December, and then we'll go that way. But no matter what happens, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I promise you. And a year from now, we're all going to go, what was the big deal? What was I worried about? Because we'll be used to it.
You know, Jody, I think too, and I agree. I'm happy that we're going to be doing this with the buyers because again, it's more protection for us and they're going to understand more about our business and what we, you know, all the, you know, value we bring as agents for the buyer, which now I don't think they respect us as much as they do their listing, you know, agent. The other thing that I thought was a really good thing for us to consider and do is when we're at a listing presentation or we're at a, you know, having the seller sign an agreement, is to let them know what to expect from the buyer side. And now we say, this is now the new thing for our buyers. This is what they have to do. And these are the things that are going to come up from the buyers for you to consider. And I think then we educate them because they're going to be a buyer somewhere down the line and they're going to know, have a little more sympathy.
Yeah, that's, I'm glad you shared that. But really, for the most part, think of the 80-20 rule, right? That applies to almost everything in life, one way or another. I think the 80-20 rule is going to apply here, or something close to that. It's pretty much going to be business as usual.
Mhm.
Things aren't really going to change as far as buyers are going to be asking for their compensation to be paid and sellers are going to be agreeing to it if the offer is good enough to do it. So I don't think things are going to change. The only thing that's changing is who gets paid what and which form it's on, and we can't put it in the MLS. Everything else is basically the same.
I wish we could take a retainer. Be like a lawyer, you just flat out say, hey, I'm going to be working with you. I'm going to help you find a house. This is the percentage I charge, but I've got, I want a $1,500 retainer to start with you.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be nice, huh? But it's okay, guys. This too shall pass. Okay.
I'm curious to see what the experience is going to be, for a lot of the buyers agents, just to see what percentage of the sellers are going to be agreeing to pay the full amount or partial amount, or the ones that just were like, no, this is great. This is what we've been waiting for as sellers. So, not sure. Do you have any numbers yet? Do you have any comments from any of the listing agents or buying agents?
I really think most listing agents are still getting their sellers to agree to pay the compensation. Now, we can't put it in writing anywhere. And CAR does not even give us a form to do that. We're not allowed to put it in writing anywhere. But when we're talking to our sellers, we are saying, hey, right? And the CMAs today, and I was going to put this in the sample listing presentation that we did, but I didn't because I don't know where it's going to go with this. But really, the CMA that you do today included pricing to pay the buyer side compensation. And so we're actually going to be able to most likely do CMAs where we could pull up properties where the seller paid a concession versus where a seller didn't pay a concession. And what we're going to see is that they can get a higher price for their home if they're willing to pay a concession, and a higher price that actually will net them more, because those are going to be better offers. So it just goes back to, oh, I don't want to pay that 3% or 2.5% or whatever percent, right? I don't want to pay that. Well, okay. And then you won't get as much money for your house. I mean, of course, we'd say it nicer, but I envision the way things are going where we'll be able to do CMAs like that, and we can present them both ways. So if you have a seller that going in is like, I don't want to pay that, I don't have to pay that anymore, do a CMA both ways. We won't be able, that won't really work for about 3 months, right? We got to see what's going on, but I envision that happening. And right now, part of the conversation is going to be about, well, we can price your home one of 2 ways. If you're willing to consider concessions, then we can price it higher, because that is taking into consideration that you're expecting to pay a concession, be it closing costs, buyer's agent fees, or what have you. Or we can price it lower if you don't want to include that in them. So it's all about educating. Because right now, every single sold comp, and for at least the next few weeks, because anything in escrow before the 13th, I think for most of us, is under the old way. So for at least the next 4 weeks, at least, the pricing is going to include that. The comps will include that. And so we just have to let people know, that sellers know, that if you don't want to consider a concession, you're not going to get this price for your home.
well, and then the other angle too is how smooth of a transaction do you want as well? I mean, because you want a qualified buyer with a qualified agent, you need to help them out a little bit, or bring those people in. That's the other thing too.
And we'll be having, uh-huh,
Another thing is a lot of people are getting confused with compensation and the what is the other one? I forgot.
concession.
Concessions. Yeah.
So
I think that's the biggest problem there. They're like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? Where do I put it? And
well, because right now compensation comes from the seller to the list agent and from the buyer to the buyer's agent. But a buyer can ask for a concession from the seller, which can include closing costs or their agent fees or whatever fees come up. So that's where the difference is. If you're asking the seller to pay the buyer's compensation, that's a concession now. It's think of it this way. If a buyer wanted the seller to pay closing costs, they would ask for it in the offer, right? And then they would pad their offer most of the time to ask for that. And when it closed and you marked closed, and then the MLS asks you if there are any concessions, and you would put the closing costs in there because that was a concession, okay? Buyer's compensation is now going to be exactly that. So it's just like asking for closing costs. But
It's stated where it's going.
Say that again?
It's stated where it's going. On concession, the buyer can, or the buyer can determine wherever they want to go, right? On a compensation, it's determined that it goes to a certain place.
Yes. Next week, we're going to talk about best practices for writing a strong offer.
You gotta go
We'll
to
include these things in there. Okay, so we'll help you next week be able to write a strong offer where you can potentially get your compensation paid for so that your buyer doesn't have to pay it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We will see you all next week and some of you on Thursday.
Thanks a lot, Jodi.
Jody.
Bye-bye.